Hello fellow time travelers, tonight we're diving into the sun-scorched streets of ancient Sumer, where you're about to try your hand at brewing beer in 3000 BC. Picture yourself standing on a dusty road, the air thick with the scent of baked clay and distant river mud. Sandals slap against your feet, and the horizon shimmers with heat. You're not just making a craft IPA for fun, you're brewing for survival, for gods, for a civilization that practically worships the stuff. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and ring that bell so you'll always know when we are off to a new time-traveling adventure together. In return, I promise to stand out by offering you the most interesting and valuable content guaranteed to help you drift off to relaxing sound sleep. Go ahead and post your location and what time it is where you're tuning in from. I always love seeing our little tribe of sleepy time travelers from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in Uruk, one of Sumer's bustling cities, and the first thing that hits you is the heat. It's not, oh, I need a fan hot, it's my skin is melting hot, and it's barely dawn. Your job? Brew beer. Sounds simple, right? Except you're not in your air-conditioned kitchen with a shiny fermenter and a YouTube tutorial. You're in a world where beer isn't just a drink, it's currency, religion, and social glue. Sumerians drank it like we drink water, and they've been perfecting it for centuries. You, with your vague memory of a brewery tour, are in way over your head. The street around you buzzes with life. Donkeys bray, hauling reed baskets stuffed with barley. Women balance clay jars on their heads, and a guy in a loincloth haggles over a goat. You're handed a rough linen tunic and a clay tablet with your orders: brew enough beer for the tavern by week's end. Fail, and you're not just fired, you might be shunned or worse, offered as a sorry to some cranky deity. Historians still argue whether Sumerian brewers were mostly women, but one thing's clear, this was no hobby. Beer was serious business, often overseen by the goddess Ninkasi herself. Your first stop is the brewery, a low mud brick building that smells like damp earth and sour mash. Inside, it's chaos. Clay pots line the walls, some as tall as you, others small enough to cradle like a baby. There's no stainless steel, no thermometers, just gritty tools and a fire pit that's more smoke than flame. You're already sweating through your tunic, and a foreman, a grizzled guy with a beard like a bird's nest, barks something in Sumerian. You don't speak the language, but his glare says, "Don't mess this up." Fun fact: Sumerians wrote the world's first beer recipe on a clay tablet, a hymn to Ninkasi that's half prayer, half instruction. Too bad you can't read cuneiform. You stare at the piles of barley, the jars of murky water, and the straw mats where something's fermenting. Your phone's dead, Google's 5,000 years away, and the locals aren't exactly handing out user manuals. You're not just brewing, you're time-traveling, culture-shocked, and probably dehydrated. Joke's on you if you thought this was like making kombucha at home. The sun climbs higher, and the brewery feels like an oven. You're already wondering how you'll survive the day, let alone the week. But there's no backing out now. You roll up your sleeves, wipe the sweat from your brow, and step into the chaos, hoping you don't accidentally poison the whole city. You're standing in the dim, smoky brewery, the air heavy with the tang of fermenting grain and your own nervous sweat. The foreman's gone, leaving you alone with a pile of barley and a collection of clay tools that look like they belong in a museum, not a kitchen. Your task is to start brewing, but these aren't the shiny gadgets you'd find in a modern brewpub. You're holding a heavy clay pestle, a lumpy grinding stone, and a basket woven from reeds that's already fraying. You've got no idea where to begin, and the Sumerians aren't exactly offering a crash course. Your 21st century brain is screaming for a manual, but all you've got is trial, error, and the sinking feeling you're about to botch this. You pick up the pestle and try to mimic the motions you saw in some documentary about ancient bread making. Close enough, right? Wrong. The clay is rough against your palms, and the barley scatters like rebellious marbles. You're supposed to crush it into a coarse meal, but half the grains are still whole and the other half's dust. Your arms ache after 10 minutes, and you're nowhere near done. A passing worker, her hands stained with malt, gives you a look that says, amateur. You mutter something about carpal tunnel, but she's already gone. Historical fact: Sumerians used barley as a staple for both bread and beer, often processing it into a dough called bapir that doubled as a brewing base. Too bad nobody told you how to get there. You move to the grinding stone, a flat slab that's heavier than it looks. You kneel, pour barley onto it, and push the smaller stone across the surface. It's like trying to roll a boulder with your bare hands. Your knees dig into the dirt floor, and sweat stings your eyes. You're making progress, kind of, but the grain's uneven, and you're pretty sure you're mixing in bits of clay from the floor. Great, now your beer's going to taste like a pottery shop. You try to channel your inner Sumerian, but all you're channeling is frustration. Joke number 1. If you think this is bad, wait till you try their dental care. Spoiler, it's just more clay. Next, you're handed a clay sieve, a wonky thing with holes big enough to let half the grit through. You pour your sad barley meal into it, shaking it like you're panning for gold. Some chaff flies out, but so does a good chunk of your hard-earned grain. You're losing more than you're keeping, and the pile on the floor is starting to look like a sad sandcastle. Historians still wonder how Sumerians managed such precise brewing with such crude tools, but you're not feeling their genius right now. You're feeling like you'd trade your left sandal for a food processor. Then there's the mixing. You're pointed to a massive clay vat, its rim crusted with dried dough from who knows when. You're supposed to blend your barley meal with water, but the wooden paddle is splintery, and the vat's so deep you're practically climbing inside to stir. The mixture clumps like bad oatmeal, and you're not sure if it's supposed to look like this or if you've already ruined it. A kid pokes his head in, giggles at your struggle, and runs off. Cute, but not helpful. You're starting to realize why Sumerians wrote hymns to their beer goddess. This is divine intervention level hard. By now, your hands are raw, your back screaming, and the brewery's heat is making your tunic stick to your skin like a bad decision. You've barely started, and you're already dreaming of quitting. But you can't. That clay tablet with your orders? It's not a suggestion, it's a contract, and in Sumer, failing at beer is like failing at life. You wipe your brow, take a deep breath, and keep stirring, hoping you're at least heading in the right direction. Spoiler, you're probably not. You're still in the brewery, your hands caked with barley dough and your tunic plastered to your sweat-soaked back. The lumpy mixture in the clay vat stares back at you, mocking your efforts. You're starting to get the hang of stirring, sort of, but now the foreman's back, and he's pointing at a shrine in the corner. It's a small clay statue of Ninkasi, the Sumerian goddess of beer, her carved eyes judging your every move. You're not just brewing for the tavern, you're brewing for her, and in 3000 BC, that's a big deal. One wrong step, and you're not just making bad beer, you're ticking off a deity. Good luck sleeping tonight. You're told to offer a prayer before you proceed. You kneel, feeling like an imposter, and mumble something about "please don't smite me." The foreman nods, but you're pretty sure he's just humoring you. Historical fact: beer was sacred in Sumer, often used in religious rituals and offered to gods like Ninkasi or Inanna. Temples had their own breweries, and priests sipped the stuff during ceremonies. You're not in a temple, but the pressure's just as real. Mess up, and you're not only failing the tavern, you're failing the divine happy hour. The foreman hands you a reed mat and gestures to spread your barley mixture on it. "This is where the magic happens," he says, or at least, that's what you guess he's saying, since Sumerian sounds like a mix of throat clearing and poetry. You spread the dough, hoping it'll sprout or ferment or whatever it's supposed to do. But the mat's dusty, and you're pretty sure a stray fly just landed in your mix. Joke number 1. You thought fruit flies were bad at your picnic? Try brewing with Sumerian hygiene standards. You're also starting to notice the social stakes. The brewery isn't just a workplace, it's a hub where people gossip, barter, and size each other up. A woman stirring a nearby vat glances at you, her expression saying, "You're not from around here, are you?" You try to smile, but your arms are screaming from all the stirring, and you're distracted by the fact that your dough smells like feet. Did you know, Sumerians sometimes added dates or herbs to their beer for flavor? However, you're stuck with plain barley because, well, you're not exactly Employee of the Month. The gods aren't just a spiritual threat, they're a practical one. The foreman explains, through gestures and grunts, that part of your brew will go to the local temple. If the priests don't like it, you could lose your rations, your reputation, or worse. You're starting to wish you'd paid more attention in history class, or at least watched a YouTube video on ancient brewing. Historians still argue whether Sumerian beer was more like a thick porridge or a watery ale, but either way, you're not feeling confident about your odds. You cover the reed mat with another to keep the flies out and step back, wiping your hands on your tunic. The brewery's still buzzing, with workers hauling grain and stoking the fire pit. You're exhausted, and it's not even noon. The sun's climbing, the air's getting thicker, and you're already dreading the next step. You glance at Ninkas's statue, half expecting her to give you a thumbs up. Spoiler, she doesn't. You're on your own, and the weight of divine expectations is heavier than that clay pestle you wrestled earlier. You take a deep breath, brace yourself, and hope the gods are in a forgiving mood. You're back in the sweltering brewery, the air thick with the sour tang of fermenting grain and the dust you've kicked up from the dirt floor. Your barley mixture is sitting on that reed mat, hopefully doing whatever it's supposed to do, but now the foreman's pointing at a massive pile of raw barley in the corner. Your next task? Grind it. By hand. 4 hours. You're already sore from stirring that lumpy dough, but there's no coffee break in 3000 BC Sumer. You grab a heavy stone grinder and drag it over, feeling like you're about to star in a CrossFit nightmare. Your back's already whining, and the Mesopotamian sun is turning the brewery into a sauna. You kneel on the hard floor, pour a handful of barley onto the flat grinding stone, and start pushing the smaller stone back and forth. It's brutal. The barley resists, the stone's rough edges bite into your palms, and every push feels like you're shoving a boulder uphill. Sweat drips into your eyes, and you're pretty sure you're inventing new curse words in your head. Historical fact: Sumerians relied on manual labor for processing barley, often using saddle querns, simple stone grinders, that required hours of backbreaking work. No wonder they worshipped beer. It was practically blood, sweat, and tears in liquid form. After what feels like an eternity, probably 20 minutes, you've got a small pile of coarse barley meal and a serious case of regret. Your hands are red, your knees ache from kneeling, and the pile of unground barley looks like it hasn't even noticed your efforts. A kid wanders by, balancing a water jug, and smirks at your pathetic progress. Joke number 1. You thought your gym membership was tough? Try grinding barley until your arms beg for mercy. You keep at it, but the heat's making it worse. The sun's blasting through the open doorway, and the brewery's mud brick walls are radiating warmth like an oven. You're starting to understand why Sumerians wore so little clothing. just a tunic and a prayer not to pass out. You pause to wipe your face, and a woman nearby tosses you a rag with a pitying look. She's grinding twice as fast, her hands moving like she's done this her whole life. Spoiler, she probably has. You try to mimic her rhythm, but your stone slips, scattering barley across the floor. Great, now you're wasting food in a city where that's practically a crime. Historians still wonder how Sumerian brewers managed to produce enough beer to supply entire cities with such labor-intensive methods. You're not wondering, you're just trying not to cry. Your barley meal's finally growing, but it's gritty, uneven, and probably full of floor dirt. You scoop it into a clay bowl, hoping nobody notices the extra crunch. Joke number 2, forget farm to table. This is dirt to drink, Sumerian style. By now, you're back screaming, and you're dreaming of an ice-cold anything. But there's no fridge, no tap water, just more barley waiting to ruin your day. You glance at the Ninkasi statue from earlier, half hoping she'll take pity and send a divine smoothie. No such luck. The foreman's circling again, his beard twitching like he's judging your soul. You're only halfway through the pile, and the day's not even close to done. You grit your teeth, adjust your grip on the grinder, and keep going, knowing that every grain you crush is one step closer to surviving this week, or not. You're still in the brewery, your hands blistered from grinding barley and your tunic soaked through with sweat. The pile of barley meal you've managed to produce is pitiful, but there's no time to sulk. The foreman's waving you toward the door. Your next task is to fetch water for the brew, and in 3000 BC, that's not as simple as turning on a faucet. You're handed a clay jug, heavy enough to make your arms groan, and pointed toward the river. The Euphrates is a short walk from Uruk, but the journey feels like a trap. You're about to learn why Sumerians were so picky about their water, and why you're already regretting this whole time travel gig. You trudge through the city, the jug banging against your hip. The streets are a chaotic blur, merchants shouting, kids darting underfoot, and a stray goat eyeing you like you owe it money. The sun's relentless, and your sandals kick up dust that sticks to your sweaty legs. You reach the riverbank, and it's not the sparkling oasis you hoped for. The Euphrates is murky, its surface swirling with silt and the occasional floating reed. You hesitate, remembering that Sumerians didn't exactly have water filters. Historical fact: brewing in Sumer relied on river water, which was often cloudy with sediment and teeming with microbes. Boiling wasn't standard, so beer was sometimes safer to drink than the water itself. You kneel at the edge, dipping your jug into the current. The water's warm, and you're pretty sure you see something wiggle in it. Great, you're brewing fish soup now. A group of women nearby, filling their own jugs, watch you with raised eyebrows. One mutters something, and the others laugh. You don't speak Sumerian, but you're guessing it's not a compliment. Joke number 1. Forget craft beer, you're about to invent Eau de Euphrates ale, complete with a mystery crunch. You lift the jug, sloshing water over the rim, and start the trek back. It's heavier now, and your arms are screaming from the grinder earlier. The city's bustle doesn't help. A cart nearly runs you over, and a kid pelts you with a date pit for no reason. You're starting to feel like the universe is personally invested in your failure. Historians still argue whether Sumerians treated their water before brewing, but you're not feeling optimistic. Your jug's contents look like chocolate syrup, and you're pretty sure drinking it raw would send you to the afterlife faster than a bad batch of beer. Back at the brewery, you pour the water into a massive clay vat, trying to ignore the gritty bits settling at the bottom. The foreman inspects it, his beard twitching like it's got its own opinions. He doesn't say anything, but his silence feels like a failing grade. You're supposed to mix this with your barley meal, but the thought of turning that swamp water into something drinkable is giving you hives. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians sometimes strained their beer through straws to avoid sediment, like sipping a smoothie through a reusable straw, except less Instagram-worthy. You grab the wooden paddle from earlier, your hands wincing at the splinters, and start stirring. The mixture looks like mud pie, and you're not sure if it's progress or a crime scene. The other workers keep their distance, probably because you look like a walking disaster. Joke number 2. If this brew doesn't work out, you can always market it as Sumerian cement. You're exhausted, filthy, and questioning every life choice that led you here. The river's still out there, mocking you with its murky depths, and you're already dreading the next trip. You're back in the brewery, stirring your questionable barley and river water slurry, the air thick with the scent of damp grain and your own desperation. The clay vat in front of you is starting to look like a science experiment gone wrong, and the foreman's nowhere to be seen, probably because he doesn't want to be blamed for whatever you're creating. Your next step is fermentation, the heart of brewing, but in 3000 BC Sumer, there's no yeast packet from the store. You're relying on wild yeast floating in the air, and the Mesopotamian heat is making everything feel like a gamble. One wrong move, and your brew could turn into vinegar, or worse. You're told to transfer your mixture to smaller clay jars for fermentation. You scoop the sludge with a wooden ladle, trying not to spill, but it's like wrangling wet cement. The jars are heavy, their rims crusted with old brew, and you're pretty sure you're adding bonus bacteria to the mix. You pour, seal the jars with clay lids, and hope for the best. Historical fact: Sumerians fermented their beer in clay vessels, often burying them in the ground to keep them cool. But cool in Sumer is still hotter than your apartment in July, and you're sweating just thinking about it. The heat's your biggest enemy now. The brewery's mud brick walls trap the sun's wrath, and the jars are warming up fast. You're supposed to let them sit for days, but you're already imagining the yeast going rogue, turning your beer into a fizzy disaster. A worker nearby, stirring her own batch, gives you a sympathetic nod. "Ninkasi help you," she says, or at least, that's what you think she says. Joke number 1. Praying to the beer goddess? Bold move when your brew smells like a gym sock. You check the jars, poking at the lids like they'll whisper instructions. They don't. The mixture inside is starting to bubble, which is either a good sign or the prelude to an explosion. You're not a chemist, but you're pretty sure fermentation shouldn't look this alive. Historians are still amazed how Sumerians controlled fermentation without modern tools, but you're just trying not to poison the tavern. You move the jars to a shadier corner, hoping the slight drop in temperature will save you. Spoiler, it probably won't. Then there's the waiting. You're supposed to guard these jars like they're your firstborn, checking for leaks or cracks while the yeast does its thing. But the brewery's a zoo. Flies buzz around, kids run through, and a stray dog sniffs your jars like they're a snack. You shoo it away, wondering if Sumerians had health inspectors. Quirky tidbit: some Sumerian beers were so thick, they were sipped through reeds, like a milkshake with extra grit. You're not sure if your brew's heading that way or just turning into swamp juice. By now, your arms are noodles, and the heat's making your head swim. You're starting to hallucinate about ice water and air conditioning. The other workers are chatting, laughing, like this is just another day. For them, it is. For you, it's a survival show, and you're not winning. Joke number 2. Forget reality TV. Brewing in Sumer is the ultimate elimination challenge. You lean against a wall, watching bubbles rise in your jars, and pray to Ninkasi that something drinkable comes out of this. The weeks ticking by, and you're one step closer to the tavern's judgment. You're still in the brewery, hovering over your clay jars like a nervous parent, the air thick with the funky smell of fermenting barley and the ever-present dust of uruk. The bubbles in your brew are slowing down, which might mean it's ready or it's dead. You're not sure, and the Sumerians aren't handing out guidebooks. Your next task is to seal the jars properly and let them rest, but in 3000 BC, sealing means wrestling with wet clay and hoping for a miracle. You also supposed to offer another prayer to Ninkasi, because apparently, brewing here is 50% skill, 50% divine begging. Your hands are raw, your tunic's a sweaty mess, and you're starting to think the goddess has better things to do than babysit your beer. You grab a lump of sticky clay from a nearby pile, kneading it like dough that hates you. It's gritty, and you're pretty sure there's a pebble in it, but you slap it onto the jar's rim anyway, pressing it into a seal. The clay's uncooperative, cracking as it dries, and you're forced to patch it with more, smearing it like a toddler with finger paint. Historical fact: Sumerians used clay not just for pots but for everything, seals, tablets, even their beer recipes were etched into it. You're starting to see why. It's everywhere, like the glitter of the ancient world. You move to the next jar, but the heat's making the clay dry too fast, and your seals look like they were made by a drunk potter. A worker nearby, her own jars neatly sealed, gives you a side eye that could curdle milk. Ninkasi won't like that, she mutters, or at least, that's what her tone implies. You mumble a prayer under your breath, something about "please don't let this explode," and keep going. Joke number 1. You thought sealing jars was easy? Try doing it when the goddess is your quality control. The prayer part's trickier. You're supposed to kneel at Ninkasi's shrine again, but you're filthy, and the other workers are watching. You whisper a quick plea, asking for a decent brew and maybe a breeze to survive the heat. The statue's blank stare isn't reassuring, but you're committed now. Historians still argue whether Sumerian brewers saw Ninkasi as a literal deity or a symbolic muse, but you're not taking chances. You'd rather overpray than end up with a batch that tastes like regret. You finish sealing the last jar, your fingers caked with clay that's drying like cement. The brewery's buzzing, with workers hauling grain and stoking the fire pit, but you're focused on your jars, willing them to behave. A stray fly lands on one, and you swat it away, wondering if Sumerians had a god for pest control. Zany detail: some Sumerian brewers added crushed dates to their beer for sweetness, but you're stuck with plain barley because nobody trusts you with the good stuff yet. By now, your back's screaming from hunching over, and the heat's making your vision blur. You're supposed to let the jars rest for a day or two, but the thought of waiting in this oven of a brewery is torture. You glance at the other workers, who seem unfazed, chatting like they're at a picnic. Joke number 2. Forget mindfulness apps. Sumerians invented stress by making beer this hard. You wipe your brow, check your wobbly seals one last time, and hope Ninkasi's in a forgiving mood. The tavern's waiting, and you're one step closer to facing the crowd. You're still in the brewery, surrounded by your clay jars, their wobbly seals holding, for now. The air's thick with the sour tang of fermentation and the dust that never seems to settle. Your brew's resting, but you're not. The foreman's back, and is pointing you toward the tavern, a low mud brick building across the street where your beer will face its first real test, the public. In 3000 BC Sumer, the tavern isn't just a place to drink, it's a social arena where reputations are made or shattered. You're about to serve your brew to a crowd of locals, and if it's bad, you won't just lose customers, you'll lose face. Your stomach's already knotting, and you haven't even poured a drop. You haul one of your jars through the bustling streets, dodging donkey carts and kids chasing stray dogs. The tavern's packed, its open courtyard buzzing with merchants, laborers, and a few shifty types who look like they barter in secrets. Reed mats cover the ground, and clay cups are scattered across low tables. You set your jar down, feeling every eye on you. Historical fact: Sumerian taverns were social hubs, often run by women called sabbatim, who served beer as both a drink and a currency. You're not running the show, but you're the new brewer, and that makes you the main event. You crack the clay seal, and a faint hiss escapes. Good sign or bad, you're not sure. You pour the beer into a cup, and it's chunky, like oatmeal with ambitions. The crowd leans in, murmuring. A burly guy with a beard like a hedge grabs the first cup, sniffs it, and takes a sip. His face twists, and you brace for disaster. Not bad, he grunts, and you exhale. But the next guy's not so kind. He spits it out, muttering something about river mud. Joke number 1. You thought your brew was rough? At least it's not that guy's breath. The crowd's a mixed bag. Some sip and nod, others grimace and push their cups away. You're starting to realize that in Sumer, beer's not just a drink, it's a status symbol. Serve a good batch, and you're the talk of Uruk. Serve a bad one, and you're the guy who ruined happy hour. A woman in a linen shawl takes a sip, then leans in close. Keep this up, and you'll be pouring for dogs, she whispers. You laugh nervously, but she's not smiling. Historians still wonder how Sumerians judged beer quality without modern standards, but you're learning fast. The crowd's your critic, and they're brutal. You keep pouring, dodging complaints and trying to smile through the sweat stinging your eyes. The tavern's heat is merciless, and your tunic's clinging like a bad date. A kid sneaks a sip, giggles, and runs off, probably to tell everyone you're the worst brewer since the last guy who got banished. Outlandish trivia question: did Sumerians drink their beer warm or chilled? Answer: warm, because chilling meant burying it in the ground, and you're not that fancy yet. By now, your jar's half empty, and the crowd split, half tolerating your brew, half plotting your exile. You're exhausted, and the social stakes are crushing. Joke number 2. Forget Yelp reviews. Sumerian taverngoers will roast you to your face. You glance at the tavern's exit, dreaming of escape, but there's no quitting. Your week's survival depends on this, and the crowd's verdict is just the start. You pour another cup, brace for more feedback, and hope you can salvage your reputation before the night's over. You're back in the brewery, the tavern's harsh critiques still ringing in your ears like a bad song on repeat. Your beer didn't bomb, but it wasn't a hit either, and the locals' half-hearted grunts of approval are hardly a confidence boost. Now, you're facing a new challenge, presenting your brew to the priests at the local temple. In 3000 BC Sumer, priests aren't just spiritual leaders, they're the ultimate gatekeepers, deciding if your beer is fit for the gods. If they approve, you're golden. If they don't, you're not just out of a job, you might be out of luck with the divine. You're sweating through your tunic, and it's not just the heat. You carry a clay jar of your best batch, well, the least chunky one, through Uruk's dusty streets to the temple, a towering ziggurat that looms like a judgmental mountain. The air smells of incense and baked clay, and your sandals slap against the stone steps as you climb. At the top, 2 priests in white linen robes wait, their shaved heads gleaming in the sun. Their eyes lock onto you, and you feel like a kid caught cheating on a test. Historical fact: Sumerian temples were major economic centers, controlling land, grain, and even breweries, with priests overseeing offerings like beer to ensure divine favor. You set the jar before them, cracking the seal with trembling hands. The beer pours out, thick and hazy, into a ceremonial cup. One priest sniffs it, his face unreadable, then passes it to the other. They sip in silence, and every second feels like an eternity. You're praying to Ninkasi, promising her anything: better seals, cleaner water, if this goes well. Joke number 1. You thought your boss was tough? Try impressing a priest who talks to gods for a living. The first priest finally speaks, his voice low and gravelly. It lacks spirit, he says, and your heart sinks. The second priest nods, adding, the goddess expects more. You're not sure if they mean flavor or divine vibes, but either way, it's not good. You stammer an apology, but they're already turning away, dismissing you with a flick of their hands. Historians still argue whether priests drank the temple's beer themselves or poured it out as offerings, but you're too busy panicking to care. You've got to fix this, or your week's done. You haul the jar back to the brewery, dodging curious stares from passers-by who probably heard about your tavern flop. The priest's words sting, but they've given you a chance to improve, barely. You're supposed to tweak your brew and try again tomorrow. Great, more grinding, more river water, more chances to mess up. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians believed bad beer could anger the gods, potentially causing floods or droughts. No pressure, right? Back in the brewery, you slump against a wall, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. The other workers are busy, their jars neatly sealed, their confidence unshaken. You're starting to feel like the odd one out, the guy who can't even make beer in a city that lives for it. Joke number 2. Forget divine wrath, you're more scared of the priest's disappointed frowns. You take a deep breath, grab your grinding stone, and start over, hoping you can brew something worthy of Ninkas's nod before the priests run out of patience. You're trudging through Uruk's chaotic marketplace, a clay jar of your latest brew cradled in your aching arms. The priest's lukewarm verdict still stings, and you're desperate to redeem yourself. Today, you're bartering your beer in the market, where Sumerians trade everything from grain to gossip. If you can get a good deal, you might earn enough to keep the brewery stocked, and maybe buy some goodwill after your tavern flop. But the marketplace is a shark tank, and you're the new fish. The air's thick with the smells of roasted fish, fresh reeds, and sweat, and the sun's beating down like it's personal. Stalls line the dusty square, piled with barley, dates, and clay pots. Merchants shout over each other, their voices blending with the bray of donkeys and the clink of bronze weights. You set your jar on a reed mat, trying to look like you belong. A wiry trader with a braided beard eyes you, sniffing your beer before you even offer it. "What's this, river sludge?" he asks, smirking. You force a smile, but you're already sweating bullets. Did you know, Sumerians used beer as a form of currency, trading it for goods or labor, with standard measures like the sila, about a liter, setting the value? Too bad your brew's value feels closer to zero. You pour a sample into a clay cup, and the trader takes a sip. His face scrunches, but he doesn't spit it out. Progress. He offers a small sack of barley in exchange, but you know it's a lowball. You try to haggle, mimicking the gestures you've seen, but your Sumerian's non-existent, and his talking circles around you. Joke number 1. Haggling in Sumer? It's like arguing with a used car salesman, but with more sand. Another trader joins in, offering a few dried fish for half your jar. You're tempted, but you need more to keep brewing. The crowd's relentless. A woman in a colorful shawl sniffs your beer and walks away. A kid tries to sneak a sip, and you shoo him off before he ruins your pitch. Everyone's got an opinion, and none of them are kind. Historians still wonder how Sumerians standardized beer quality for trade, but you're learning the hard way. If it doesn't impress, it doesn't sell. You finally strike a deal, 2 sacks of barley and a handful of dates for your jar, but it's barely enough to cover your next batch. You're starting to feel like you're brewing just to stay afloat. Then there's the competition. Another brewer, a grizzled woman with a scar across her cheek, sets up nearby. Her beer's darker, smoother, and the traders flock to her like flies to honey. She shoots you a smug look, and you're pretty sure she's the one who called your brew goat piss earlier. Zany detail: some Sumerian traders marked their beer jars with cuneiform to brag about quality. Too bad yours would just say, "Please don't hate me." You're outclassed, and the market's proving it. By now, your jar's empty, and your haul's pathetic. The sun's climbing, your tunic's a swamp, and the marketplace's noise is giving you a headache. You're learning that brewing in Sumer isn't just about making beer, it's about surviving the social gauntlet. Joke number 2, forget Wall Street. Uruk's market is the real cutthroat economy. You sling the barley sacks over your shoulder, pocket the dates, and head back to the brewery, hoping you can turn this mess into something the priests won't sneer at. You're back in the brewery, the sting of the marketplace's mediocre deals still fresh as you dump your hard-won barley sacks onto the dirt floor. Your arms are screaming from hauling them, and your tunic's a grimy mess, but there's no time to sulk. The foreman's barking orders, and you're up against rival brewers who seem to churn out beer like it's no big deal. Rations and rivalries: you compete with rival brewers, where sabotage and rationed grain heighten tensions. Your latest batch is fermenting, but the pressure's on, grain is tightly rationed, and the other brewers are eyeing your share like hawks. In 3000 BC Sumer, brewing's a cutthroat game, and you're barely keeping up. You grab your grinding stone, ready to process the barley you bartered for, but a quick glance at the sacks makes your heart sink. It's not enough. The market traders fleeced you, and now you're short on grain for the next batch. The foreman rations out the brewery's supply, handing you a measly portion while the scar-faced brewer from the market gets double. She smirks, her hands already working her own pile like a pro. You're starting to suspect she's not just better, she's playing dirty. Historical fact: Sumerian breweries were tightly controlled, with grain rations recorded on clay tablets to prevent waste or theft. Too bad nobody's watching your back. You start grinding, the familiar ache settling into your shoulders. The stone's rough, the barley stubborn, and every push feels like a personal insult. Then you notice something: your pile's smaller than it was an hour ago. You glance around, and a younger brewer, a wiry guy with shifty eyes, is whistling too innocently. Sabotage? Probably. You confront him, but he shrugs, muttering something in Sumerian that sounds like, "Not my problem." Joke number 1. You thought office politics were bad? Try brewing when your co-workers steal your lunch and your grain. You guard your barley like it's gold, but the tension's thick. The brewery's a pressure cooker, with everyone competing for the foreman's approval and the temple's favor. The scar-faced brewer's batch is already fermenting, her jars neatly sealed, while you're still stuck on step 1. You overhear her whispering to another worker, pointing at your jars. Are they plotting? You're paranoid now, but in Sumer, paranoia's just survival. Historians still wonder how Sumerian brewers managed rivalries without derailing production, but you're too busy watching your back to care. You finally grind enough barley to start mixing, but the rationed grain means your batch will be small, barely enough to impress the priests. You pour in the murky river water from earlier, remember that Euphrates soup? Stirring until your arms beg for mercy. The mixture's thin, and you're worried it won't ferment properly. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians sometimes named their beers, like Alialu or Sikaru, to show off quality. You're tempted to call yours Desperation Ale, but you're not sure the priests would laugh. The day drags on, and the brewery's heat is unrelenting. You're exhausted, but you can't let your guard down. The shifty brewer's hovering again, and you're pretty sure he's eyeing your jars. You move them closer, glaring like a territorial dog. Joke number 2, forget guard dogs. Sumerian brewers needed guard scorpions to keep their beer safe. You're one bad move from losing everything, and the week's not even over. You take a deep breath, wipe the sweat from your brow, and keep stirring, hoping you can outlast the rivals and rationed grain long enough to prove yourself. You're still in the brewery, your hands caked with barley mush and your nerves frayed from dodging rival bros and their sneaky grain grabs. Your latest batch is limping along, fermenting in jars that look like they're plotting against you, but the real enemy today is the heat. It's not just hot, it's a relentless, soul-crushing inferno that makes every move feel like wading through molten sand. In 3000 BC Sumer, there's no AC, no fans, just the merciless Mesopotamian sun turning the brewery into a sweat lodge. You're battling heat stroke, spoiled beer, and the sinking feeling that you're one bad day from total collapse. You check your jars, wiping sweat from your eyes as you pray the fermentation hasn't gone sour. The air's so thick it's like breathing soup, and the clay vessels are warm to the touch, bad news for yeast that's already temperamental. You move them to the shadiest corner, but shade in Uruk is a cruel joke, barely cooler than standing on the sun. Historical fact: Sumerians often buried beer jars underground to keep them cool during fermentation, but you don't have the time or tools for that. You're stuck hoping Ninkuses got your back, because the heat's threatening to cook your brew before it's even done. You try to work, but the heat's making you dizzy. Your tunic's a soggy rag, and every step feels like you're dragging weights. You grab your grinding stone, but your hands slip, scattering barley across the floor. A worker nearby laughs, and you're too tired to care. Joke number 1. You thought hot yoga was intense? Try brewing in Sumer. It's yoga, cardio, and a sauna in one. You scoop up the spilled grain, praying nobody notices, but the foreman's eagle eyes are everywhere, and his beard's twitching again. Then there's the beer itself. You crack open a jar to check, and the smell hits you, sour, like vinegar with a side of regret. The heat's speeding up fermentation, and not in a good way. You're supposed to serve this at the festival soon, but right now, it's closer to salad dressing than ale. Historians still wonder how Sumerians kept beer from spoiling in such brutal conditions, and you're starting to think they just drank fast. You reseal the jar, hoping a miracle happens before the deadline. Your body's not cooperating either. Your head's pounding, and your vision's blurry, heat strokes knocking, and you don't have the luxury of a break. You splash some questionable river water on your face, but it's like pouring warm tea on a fire. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians believed beer could cure ailments, but you're pretty sure yours is causing them. You stumble to the water jug, sipping just enough to stay upright, and get back to work, because quitting's not an option. The other bros are struggling too, but they are tougher, used to this oven of a life. The scar-faced woman from the market still churning out batches, her face set like she's daring the sun to try harder. You're jealous, but also too dehydrated to care. Joke number 2, forget survival of the fittest, Sumerian brewing survival of the sweatiest. You drag yourself back to the grinding stone, the heat pressing down like a physical weight, and keep going. The festival's coming, and you're one spoiled jar away from disaster. You're still in the brewery, the heat clinging to you like a second skin, your jars of beer teetering on the edge of salvation or ruin. The sour whiff from your last check still haunts you, but there's no time to dwell. The foreman's looming, his beard practically vibrating with impatience. You're up against a brutal Sumerian schedule, with the festival deadline closing in like a sandstorm. In 3000 BC, time isn't a suggestion, it's a taskmaster, and you're racing to finish your brew before the tavern, priests, and entire city judge you. Every second feels like a trap, and you're one misstep from falling into it. You scramble to check your jars, your hands shaking as you pry open a clay seal. The bee's still bubbling, but it's sluggish, and the heat's not helping. You need to move them to the tavern soon, but they're not ready, and the clock's ticking. Well, not a clock, but the foreman's glare is just as relentless. Historical fact: Sumerians tracked time with water clocks and sundials, using strict schedules for brewing and offerings to keep temples and taverns stocked. You're starting to wish you had a sundial, or at least a nap, but there's no pause button in Uruk. You start prepping more barley, your arms screaming from the grinder's endless demands. The rationed grain from your market hall is running low, and you're cutting corners, hoping nobody notices. A worker bumps into you, spilling half your pile, and you bite back a yell. Was it sabotage or just clumsiness? You're too frazzled to tell. Joke number 1. You thought deadlines were bad at your desk job? Try brewing when the whole city's waiting to dunk on you. The brewery's a madhouse, workers hauling jars, stoking the fire pit, shouting in Sumerian you can't understand. You're supposed to seal another batch, but the clay's drying too fast, and your seals look like a toddler's art project. You patch them, muttering to Ninkasi for patience, but the goddess feels as distant as a cold drink. Historians still argue whether Sumerian brewers worked in shifts to meet deadlines, but you're pulling a solo all-nighter, and your body's not thrilled. Your head's pounding, and the heat's making your vision swim, but you keep going. Failure's not an option. Then there's the logistics. You need to transport your jars to the tavern, but the streets are packed, and donkey carts don't come with GPS. You enlist a kid to help, promising him a date from your market stash, but is more interested in kicking pebbles than carrying. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians used reed baskets to transport beer jars, padding them with straw to avoid cracks. You're using what's left of your sanity instead. You load the jars onto a wobbly cart, praying they don't shatter before you get there. By now, you're moving on fumes, your tunic a sweaty disaster, your hands blistered from grinding and sealing. The festival's tomorrow, and you're nowhere near ready. The scar-faced brewer's already sent her batch ahead, her smug grin saying she's got this in the bag. Joke number 2. Forget crunch time, Sumerian brewing's crumble time, and you're the one breaking. You push the cart toward the tavern, the jars clinking ominously, and hope you can pull this off before time and the city runs you over. You're pushing a creaky cart through Uruk's packed streets, your clay jars of beer clinking like they're plotting a breakout. The festival's today, and you're headed to the tavern to serve your brew to a crowd that's equal parts thirsty and judgmental. In 3000 BC Sumer, festivals aren't just parties, they're public trials, where your beer could make you a hero or a laughingstock. The sun's blazing, your tunic's a sweaty rag, and every jolt of the cart feels like a personal attack. You're one cracked jar away from disaster, and the ticking deadline from yesterday's chaos is still snapping at your heels. You reach the tavern, a sprawling courtyard buzzing with festival energy. Reed awnings shade low tables, and the air's thick with the scents of roasted barley, incense, and anticipation. Merchants, priests, and laborers mingle, their voices rising over the strum of a lyre. You set up your jars, your hands shaking as you crack the first seal. The beer pours out, thick, hazy, and slightly less sour than yesterday, but it's no craft IPA. Historical fact: Sumerian festivals often featured communal drinking, with beer served in shared vessels to honor gods like Ninkasi. You're hoping the goddess is watching, because you need all the help you can get. The crowd closes in, grabbing clay cups and eyeing you like you're on trial. A burly trader takes the first sip, his beard twitching as he swallows. Better than last time, he grunts, and you almost cry with relief. But then a woman in a beaded shawl spits hers out, muttering about muddy swill. The crowd laughs, and your face burns hotter than the sun. Joke number 1. You thought karaoke was embarrassing? Try serving bad beer to a Sumerian mob. You keep pouring, dodging glares, and trying to smile through the sweat stinging your eyes. The scar-faced brewers nearby, her jars drawing a bigger crowd. Her bees darker, smoother, and the murmurs of approval make your stomach twist. You overhear someone say hers is touched by Ninkasi, while yours is touched by a donkey. Ouch! Historians still wonder how Sumerians judged beer at festivals, but you're learning fast. It's less about taste and more about who can trash talk the loudest. You're losing ground, and the festival's only half over. Then there's the priests. They're here, their white robes pristine, sipping your beer with faces like stone. You're still smarting from their last critique, and you're praying this batch passes muster. One nods slightly, progress, but the other just sets his cup down, unsmiling. You're not sure if it's approval or pity. Quirky tidbit: Sumerians sometimes offered festival beer to the gods by pouring it into sacred pits. You're tempted to dump your whole jar in and call it a day. The crowd's growing rowdier, and a spilled cup nearly starts a brawl. You're pouring faster, trying to keep up, but your jars are running low, and the festival's not over. The lyre player's tune picks up, and someone shouts for more beer, yours, not Scarface, for once. It's a small win, but you'll take it. Joke number 2, forget going viral. Going vile in Sumer means your beer doesn't get you booed. You brace yourself, pour the last of your batch, and hope the crowd's cheers outweigh the jeers before the night ends. You're standing in the tavern's crowded courtyard, the festival's chaos swirling around you like a desert storm. Your last clay jar is nearly empty, the thick, hazy beer dribbling into cups as the crowd's cheers and jeers blend with the lyre's fading notes. The sun's dipping low, painting Uruk's mud brick walls in shades of amber, but the heat still clings, and your tunic's a sodden wreck. You've poured your heart, along with a lot of sweat, into this brew, and now it's judgment time. In 3000 BC Sumer, the crowd's verdict isn't just feedback, it's your lifeline. Will they raise their cups in praise, or will you slink back to the brewery in disgrace? You hold your breath, waiting for the final score. The burly trader from earlier grabs another cup, downs it, and bellows, "Not bad for a newcomer." A few others clap, and you feel a flicker of hope. But the woman in the beaded shawl's still grumbling, and a group of laborious mutter about "better last year." The scar-faced brewer's soaking up praise nearby, her jars long empty, her smirk sharper than a reed stylus. You're not her, and the crowd knows it. Historical fact: Sumerian beer was often judged by its clarity and strength, with top brews earning brewers social clout or even temple favor. Your brew's cloudy, and clout feels like a distant dream. A priest steps forward, his white robe glowing in the twilight. He sips your beer, his face unreadable, then nods, once, sharply. "Ninkasi accepts," he says, and the crowd murmurs. It's not a rave review, but it's not a banishment either. You exhale, your knees wobbling. Historians still argue whether priests truly believed beer pleased the gods or just liked the free drinks, but you're too relieved to care. Joke number 1, you survived the priest's taste test. Now if only you could survive their poker faces. The crowd thins as the festival winds down. Some pat your shoulder, others shrug and wander off. You've got a few fans, but you're no hero. The scar-faced brewer's already packing up, her reputation cemented, while you're left scraping the dregs of your jar. Outlandish trivia question: did Sumerians celebrate good brewers with gifts? Answer: sometimes. Top brewers might get extra rations or a fancy title, but you're stuck with a sore back and a half-hearted "not bad." You're exhausted, your hands blistered, your ego bruised, but you made it through the week, barely. Joke number 2, forget gold medals. Sumerian brewing awards are just you didn't poison anyone. You glance at the Ninkasi shrine in the tavern's corner, its clay statue catching the last light. You whisper a thanks, half expecting her to wink. She doesn't, but you feel a tiny spark of pride. You didn't last the week with glory, but you lasted. That's enough, for now. The courtyard's emptying, the lyre silent, the air cooling as stars prick the Sumerian sky. You sink onto a reed mat, your body heavy, your mind drifting. The festival's hum fades, replaced by the soft rustle of palm fronds and the distant lap of the Euphrates. You're done, grimy, aching, but done. The brewery's grind, the market's hustle, the crowd's judgment, it's all behind you. Close your eyes, let the night's gentle breath carry you. You brood in Uruk, face the gods, and live to tell the tale. Sleep now, wrapped in the quiet of a city older than time, its stories whispering you into dreams. Hey guys, wasn't that Sumerian brewing adventure a wild ride? You survived the heat, the grind, and the tavern's tough crowd, well, almost. Now, let's shift gears and slip into a different kind of tale from ancient Sumer, one woven by the gods themselves. Picture the shimmering Euphrates, the rustle of reeds, and divine voices shaping the world. Continue dozing off and let's open the pages of a myth that's been whispered for millennia. Here's the story of Enki and Ninhursag, straight from Sumer's heart. In the ancient land of Sumer, where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers cradled the first cities, the gods held sway over earth and sky. Among them was Enki, the lord of wisdom and waters, whose clever mind sparkled like sunlight on a canal. In the dawn of the world, when the plains were young and bare, Enki set to work crafting the lifeblood of Sumer. With a wave of his hand, he carved rivers and canals, their waters glinting like silver threads across the dusty land. The marshes bloomed with reeds, and fish darted in the currents, all born from Enki's boundless ingenuity. His laughter echoed as he watched the waters flow, nourishing the soil and promising abundance for the people yet to come. Enki stood upon a mound of clay, his robes shimmering with the hues of the deep sea, and surveyed his creation. The canal stretched far, linking villages that would one day grow into mighty Uruk and Ur. He whispered to the waters, guiding their paths, ensuring they would never run dry. The Sumerians would later sing of Enki's gift, for without his rivers, their fields would wither, and their cities would crumble to dust. Here's an interesting historical fact side note. Sumerians revered Enki as the god of wisdom, water, and creation, often depicting him with streams flowing from his shoulders in cuneiform art, symbolizing his role in sustaining their irrigation-based civilization. Now back to our story. Yet Enki's work was not solitary. He knew the land needed more than water to thrive, and his heart turned to the other gods, whose powers would complete the world. The stage was set for a tale of divine craft and rivalry, one that would shape Sumer's destiny and echo through its myths for ages. The land of Sumer, now laced with Enki's shimmering canals, lay ready for a new divine touch. Ninhursag, the great mother goddess, stepped forth, her presence as warm and steady as the earth itself. Known as the Lady of the Sacred Mountain, her power flowed from the heart of creation, nurturing life where Enki's waters reached. With gentle hands, she knelt upon the riverbanks, her fingers tracing patterns in the damp soil. From her touch sprang fertile fields, their rich, dark earth promising harvests of barley and wheat. Reeds thickened along the marshes, and date palms rose, their fronds swaying in the warm breeze. Ninhursag's work was meticulous, each blade of grass and cluster of grain a testament to her care. She shaped meadows where goats could graze and orchards where figs would ripen under the Sumerian sun. The people who would one day walk these lands would owe their sustenance to her, their granaries filled by the bounty she wove into the earth. Her voice, soft as a lullaby, hummed over the fields, coaxing life to take root and flourish. Historical fact side note, Ninhursag, also called Nintu or Lady of Birth, was central to Sumerian religion, often worshipped as the mother of gods and humans, with temples dedicated to her in cities like Adab and Kesh. Now back to our story. As Ninhursag stood, her robes dusted with soil, she gazed upon the verdant plains with quiet pride. The rivers Enki crafted now fed her creations, a partnership that seemed to promise harmony. Yet, as the gods often do, they watched each other's deeds with keen eyes, and a spark of rivalry simmered beneath their shared triumph, waiting to ignite. The plains of Sumer now glowed with life, Enki's rivers weaving through Ninhursag's fertile fields, a tapestry of divine craft. Yet harmony among gods is fleeting, and a shadow of discord crept between the two creators. Enki, ever proud of his cunning, boasted that his waters were the true heart of Sumer's bounty, for without them the land would be barren dust. He stood by his canals, his voice ringing with confidence, claiming the people's future harvests as his own triumph. Ninhursag, her hands still earthy from shaping the fields, heard his words and bristled. Her eyes, sharp as flint, met his, and she countered that her fertile soil was the cradle of life, the true gift that would feed the world. Their voices rose, echoing over the marshes, each god insisting their creation outshone the other. Enki pointed to the fish teeming in his waters, the reeds bending under his currents. Ninhursag gestured to the golden barley swaying in her fields, the palms heavy with dates. The argument grew heated, their divine pride clashing like storm clouds. Neither would yield, for both knew Sumer's prosperity rested on their combined works, yet each craved the greater glory. By the way, Sumerian myths often depict gods in human-like disputes, reflecting the culture's view of deities as powerful but flawed beings, with rivalries shaping cosmic and earthly order. Let's continue. The other gods, watching from their celestial council, murmured with unease. Sumer's future hung in the balance, and the rift between Enki and Ninhursag threatened to unravel their shared creation. The stage was set for a challenge, one that would test their powers and reveal the depths of their divine wills. The dispute between Enki and Ninhursag hung heavy over Sumer's lush plains, their voices still echoing across the riverbanks. Enki, his eyes gleaming with the spark of a new idea, stepped forward, his robes rippling like the waters he commanded. He proposed a contest to settle their rivalry, a trial of divine creation to prove whose craft truly held sway. Ninhursag, her gaze steady and unyielding, accepted, her hands clenching the soil she had shaped. The terms were simple, each would create something wondrous, and the gods would judge whose gift brought greater glory to Sumer. Enki's mind whirled with possibilities, his cunning already spinning plans like threads of a great tapestry. He envisioned creations that would dazzle, feats of water and wisdom to cement his name above all. Ninhursag, rooted in the earth's deep pulse, turned her thoughts to life itself, to forms that would embody her nurturing power. The air crackled with their resolve, the rivers and fields below seeming to hold their breath. The other gods gathered, their forms shimmering in the divine assembly, to witness the contest. The sky god, and Enlil, lord of air, leaned close, their whispers stirring the heavens. The outcome would not only crown a victor but shape the land's destiny, binding Enki and Ninhursag in a test that would reveal their strengths and their flaws. The challenge was set, and the gods' eyes turned to Ninhursag, who would make the first move. Ninhursag, standing firm on Sumer's fertile plains, began her work in the contest against Enki. With a sweep of her hands, she called forth 8 sacred plants from the earth, each a marvel of divine creation. From the rich soil sprang the honey plant, its blossoms dripping with sweet nectar, the flax, its fibers strong for weaving, and the thornbush, its spines sharp as a warrior's spear. The afu plant rose, its roots deep and nourishing, followed by the agana, its leaves broad and healing. The aglura, fragrant and vibrant, bloomed alongside the aku, heavy with edible seeds, and the Newman, its stalk sturdy for building. Each plant shimmered with Ninhursag's power, their forms woven with purpose to serve Suma's people. The gods watched in awe as the plants swayed under the warm sun, their colors vivid against the dark earth. Ninhursag's creations were not mere flora but gifts of sustenance, medicine, and craft, each imbued with a spark of her nurturing essence. She stepped back, her face calm but proud, knowing her plants would feed, clothe, and heal the mortals who would one day walk these lands. The divine assembly murmured, impressed by Ninhursag's skill, but their eyes turned to Enki, whose curiosity burned brighter than the noon sun. The plants stood as a challenge, their beauty and utility a high bar for Enki's response. Ninhursag folded her arms, waiting to see how the god of wisdom would answer her creation. The sacred plants of Ninhursag stood tall on Suma's plains, their leaves glinting under the sun's gaze, a testament to her divine craft. Enki, the god of wisdom, approached, his eyes alight with curiosity and a hunger to unravel their secrets. Drawn by the plants' vibrant forms, he knelt beside them, his fingers brushing the honey plant's sweet blossoms and the aku's heavy seeds. Unable to resist, Enki plucked each one, tasting their essence to discern the power Ninhursag had woven into them. The honey plant's nectar was ambrosial, the flax fibrous and strong, the thornbush sharp enough to draw a drop of divine blood. Each plant revealed its purpose, sustenance, healing, utility, but Enki's act was bold, for he consumed what was not his to claim. As he savored the Newman's sturdy stalk, Enki's mind raced, piecing together the plant's roles in Suma's future. He marveled at Ninhursag's skill, yet his tasting was no mere admiration, it was a quest to know her creations as deeply as she did. The gods watching from their celestial council stirred, sensing a breach of respect in Enki's actions. Here's another historical fact side note that adds to the story. In Sumerian mythology, Enki's curiosity often led to both great deeds and unintended consequences, reflecting the Sumerians' view of wisdom as a double-edged gift that could spark innovation or discord. Now let us continue with our tale. Ninhursag, observing from a distance, felt a spark of indignation. Her plants were sacred, crafted for mortals and gods alike, not for Enki to devour without permission. Her brow furrowed, and the earth beneath her seemed to tremble, a silent warning of the storm her anger would soon unleash. Enki, unaware, licked the last traces of nectar from his fingers, his mind already turning to his own contest creation. Enki stood among the remnants of Ninhursag's sacred plants, their broken stems and scattered leaves a testament to his reckless curiosity. Ninhursag, her eyes blazing like embers, stepped forward, the earth quaking faintly beneath her feet. Her voice, sharp as a desert wind, cut through the stillness, condemning Enki for his transgression. "Those plants were my gift to Suma," she declared, "crafted with care for mortals to thrive, not for you to consume in greed." Enki, caught off guard, tried to speak, but Ninhursag's wrath was unyielding. She raised her hands, and a curse fell upon him, woven with the power of the earth itself, binding his body to suffer for his disrespect. The gods in their celestial assembly gasped, their murmurs rippling like waves. Ninhursag's curse was no mere reprimand, it was a divine judgment, meant to teach the god of wisdom humility. The air grew heavy, the rivers Enki once crafted seeming to pause in their flow, as if mourning their master's fate. Ninhursag turned away, her heart torn between justice and sorrow, for though her anger burned, Enki was her kin among the gods. Quick historical fact: Sumerian myths often depict curses as divine tools to enforce order, reflecting the culture's belief in balance and retribution, especially when sacred boundaries were crossed. Enki stood silent, the weight of the curse already stirring within him. The honey plant's sweetness soured in his memory, and the Numen's strength mocked his growing weakness. Ninhursag's plants, once a marvel, now loomed as symbols of his era. The contest, once a playful challenge, had spiraled into a divine conflict, and Suma's plains bore witness to the rift between its creators. The plains of Suma lay quiet under a heavy sky, as Enki, once vibrant with wisdom, faltered under Ninhursag's curse. The god of waters clutched his chest, his breath shallow, his body racked with pain. Each of the 8 sacred plants he had tasted now turned against him, their divine essence twisting into ailments that gnawed at his strength. His limbs grew heavy, as if the afues roots bound them, his eyes dimmed, as though the Aglura's fragrance clouded them. The honey plant's sweetness burned in his throat, and the thornbush sting pierced his heart. Enki, who had carved rivers and sparked life, now stumbled, his form fading like a shadow under the relentless sun. He sank to the earth beside his canals, their gentle ripples no comfort to his suffering. The gods' celestial council watched in dismay, their voices hushed with fear. Enki's illness was no mortal affliction. It threatened the balance of Sumer itself, for without his wisdom, the rivers might dry, and the cities yet to rise could crumble. The marshes whispered with unease, and the date palms bowed as if in mourning. Ninhursag, standing apart, felt the weight of her curse. Her anger still smoldered, but the sight of Enki's pain stirred a flicker of doubt. The other gods, sensing the growing peril, turned their eyes to her, their silent pleas clear. Enki's fate, and Suma's, now rested in the hands of the mother goddess, whose next act would decide whether wrath or mercy would prevail. Enki lay weakened on Suma's riverbank, his once radiant form dulled by the curse's relentless grip. The gods, gathered in their celestial council, could no longer stand idle. The sky god raised his voice, its thunder echoing across the heavens, pleading for Enki's life. Enlil, lord of air, joined him, his words sharp with urgency, for Enki's wisdom held the river's flow and the land's heartbeat. Even Inanna, fierce and radiant, softened her gaze, her heart stirred by the sight of Enki's suffering. The divine assembly turned as one to Ninhursag, their eyes beseeching the mother goddess to lift her curse and restore the balance of Suma. The marshes stilled, and the date palms stood silent, as if the world itself awaited Ninhursag's response. She stood apart, her hands stained with the earth of her sacred plants, her face a mask of conflict. Enki's transgression had wounded her pride, yet the gods' pleas and the land's quiet trembling stirred her compassion. The curse had been just, but its cost now threatened all she had nurtured. Ninhursag's gaze softened as she looked upon Enki, his breath shallow, his eyes dim. The other gods' voices rose again, a chorus of concern, urging her to act before Enki's light faded entirely. The mother goddess clenched her fists, the soil crumbling between her fingers, and took a step toward the ailing god. The fate of Suma hung in the balance, and Ninhursag's heart wrestled with the choice between retribution and mercy. Ninhursag stood over Enki, his weakened form slumped beside the shimmering canal he had crafted. The gods' pleas echoed in her ears, their voices a tide pulling at her resolve. The mother goddess, her heart torn between justice and compassion, gazed upon Suma's plains, where her fertile fields met Enki's rivers in a delicate dance of creation. To let Enki perish would unravel their shared work, leaving the land barren and the people yet to come without hope. Yet her pride, stung by his reckless tasting of her sacred plants, demanded he learn respect for her power. At last, Ninhursag knelt beside Enki, her hands hovering over his trembling frame. "You have erred, Lord of Wisdom," she said, her voice firm but softened by mercy, "but Suma needs your waters as it needs my earth. Swear to honor my creations, and I shall lift this curse." Enki, his breath ragged, nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a flicker of gratitude. The gods in their celestial council held their breath, the air shimmering with the weight of the moment. Ninhursag's hands glowed with the warmth of the earth, her power stirring like roots beneath the soil. She prepared to weave a new act of creation, not to punish but to heal, to restore Enki and reaffirm the bond between them. The rivers sparkled, the reeds swayed, and Suma's plains seemed to lean closer, awaiting the mother goddess's next move, a gesture that would mend the divine rift and secure the land's future. Ninhursag, her hands glowing with the earth's deep power, leaned over Enki, whose breath came in faint whispers by the canal's edge. To heal him, she summoned her divine craft, drawing on the same creative force that birthed her sacred plants. From each of Enki's 8 ailments, she wove a new deity, each born to cure a specific pain. From his aching ribs, she created Ninsutu, whose touch soothed bones. From his clouded eyes, Ninkasi emerged, her light restoring sight, and later, her name would grace Suma's bier. From his burning throat, Nindinuga arose, cooling the fever within. 5 more deities, Ninazu, Nintal, Ninsig, Notsi, and Inshag, sprang from his tormented limbs, heart, and mind, each a spark of healing. The gods in their celestial council watched in awe as these new beings, radiant and purposeful, gathered around Enki. Ninhursag's hands guided them, her voice a soft chant, binding their powers to his recovery. The air shimmered, and the rivers seemed to sing, their currents quickening as Enki's strength began to return. The Mother Goddess's mercy was not mere forgiveness but a testament to her dominion over life itself. The plains of Suma glowed under the act of creation, the reeds and date palms standing taller as if celebrating. Enki's eyes flickered with renewed light, his breath steadying, as Ninhursag's healing deities worked their divine will. The rift between the gods began to mend, promising a harmony that would nurture the land for ages to come. Enki's form, once dimmed by Ninhursag's curse, now stirred with renewed vigor on the riverbank. The 8 healing deities, born from his ailments, wove their powers around him, their radiant forms dissolving the pains that had gripped his body. Ninsutu eased his bones, Ninkasi cleared his vision, and Nindinuga cooled his fevered throat. The others, Ninazu, Nintal, Ninsig, Notsi, and Inshag, mended his limbs, heart, and mind, their divine touch restoring the god of wisdom to his full strength. Enki rose, his robes shimmering like the canals at dawn, and bowed to Ninhursag, his eyes filled with humility and gratitude. "Your power is vast, Mother of Earth," he said, his voice steady, "and I honor your creations as equal to my own." Ninhursag nodded, her face softened by the reconciliation, her hands still dusted with the soil of her sacred work. The gods in their celestial council exhaled, their murmurs of relief rippling through the heavens. Enki's recovery was more than a personal triumph. It was a promise that Suma's rivers and fields would continue to thrive under their shared care. The air grew lighter, and the date palms swayed as if in quiet celebration. Interesting historical fact side note. Sumerian myths often portray Enki as a god who learns from his mistakes, reflecting the culture's value of wisdom tempered by humility, especially in divine partnerships. On we go! Enki and Ninhursag stood together, their rivalry transformed into respect. The plains below glowed with the harmony of their creations, the rivers sparkling and the fields lush. The healing deities faded into the divine assembly, their purpose fulfilled, leaving behind a renewed bond that would shape Suma's prosperity for generations. The plains of Suma basked in the glow of reconciliation as Enki and Ninhursag stood side by side, their once fierce rivalry now a bond of mutual respect. Enki's rivers flowed with renewed vigor, their waters nourishing Ninhursag's fertile fields, where barley and date palms flourished under the warm sun. The gods in their celestial council smiled, their voices a soft hum of approval, for the harmony between the Lord of Wisdom and the Mother Goddess ensured Suma's prosperity. The reeds along the marshes swayed in rhythm with the currents, and the air carried the sweet scent of blooming flax, a testament to their united creations. Enki, his eyes bright with gratitude, spoke of Ninhursag's healing deities, praising their skill and her compassion. Ninhursag, her hands resting on the earth, acknowledged Enki's rivers, which gave life to her plants and fields. Their words wove a pact, unspoken but binding, to work as one for the people who would soon build cities like Uruk and Eridu. The divine rift, born of pride and misunderstanding, had been mended, and Suma's future gleamed with promise. Historical fact side note: Sumerian mythology often emphasizes the interdependence of gods like Enki and Ninhursag, mirroring the real-world reliance on irrigation and agriculture for the civilization's survival. The other gods, from En in the sky to Enlil in the air, nodded in agreement, their counsel strengthened by the lesson of cooperation. The land below pulsed with life, its rivers and fields a living tapestry of divine partnership. Enki and Ninhursag turned their gazes to the horizon, where the first sparks of human settlements would soon rise, built on the foundation of their restored harmony. The harmony between Enki and Ninhursag settled over Suma like a gentle breeze, their reconciled powers breathing life into the land. The rivers, crafted by Enki's cunning, sparkled under the sun, their currents feeding Ninhursag's fields, where golden barley swayed and date palms cast soft shadows. The marshes teemed with fish and reeds, while the orchards bore figs and pomegranates, each fruit a testament to the gods' united will. The people yet to come would thrive here, their cities rising on the strength of this divine balance, their granaries full and their altars adorned with offerings to honor the creators. The lesson of the contest, born in rivalry and sealed in mercy, wove itself into Suma's heart. Enki's wisdom, tempered by humility, and Ninhursag's nurturing, fortified by justice, ensured the land's eternal cycle of growth and renewal. The gods' celestial council, watching from above, etched this tale into the stars, a reminder that creation thrives not in pride but in partnership. The rivers and fields below stood as living proof, their beauty a silent hymn to cooperation. By the way, Sumerian myths like this one often served as teaching tools, conveying values like balance and mutual respect, which were critical for a society dependent on cooperative irrigation and farming. Pretty cool, right? Now on to the final part of our story. The plains glowed with quiet splendor, the air warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flax and honey plants. Enki and Ninhursag, their bond unbroken, gazed upon their work, knowing it would endure through the ages. The land hummed with promise, its rivers flowing and fields blossoming, a legacy of divine unity that would cradle Suma's people for generations yet to dawn. The tale of Enki and Ninhursag, born in the cradle of Suma's rivers and fields, drew to a close under a sky dusted with stars. Their contest, sparked by pride, had woven a tapestry of rivalry, transgression, and redemption, leaving the land richer for it. Enki's canals, glinting like silver threads, wound through Ninhursag's fertile plains, where barley and date palms stood as silent witnesses to their harmony. The gods' celestial council, their voices now a gentle murmur, sealed the myth into the heavens, a story to guide the people who would one day walk these lands. The lesson was clear: wisdom and nurturing, when balanced, create a world that endures. The rivers flowed on, their ripples carrying the echo of Enki's cunning and Ninhursag's mercy. The fields, kissed by the sun, bore the fruits of their reconciliation, promising abundance for Suma's future. This myth, etched into clay tablets and whispered in temples, taught humility and respect, binding the divine and mortal in a shared dance of creation. The land itself seemed to sigh, content under the gods' watchful eyes, its beauty a living testament to their unity. The marshes grew still, their reeds swaying softly, as the night deepened over Suma's plains. The air, warm and fragrant with flax and nectar, wrapped the land in quiet embrace. The river's gentle lapping faded, blending with the rustle of palm fronds, lulling the world into rest. Enki and Ninhursag's tale drifted into the stars, its wisdom a soft whisper for all who listened. Sleep now, cradled by the ancient land's calm, its stories humming gently, guiding you to dreams.